Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Continuing our run through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right now we're up to the episodes called Image in the Sand and Shadows and Symbols, I think. It's the first and second episode of the seventh season premiere. Image in the Sand aired on September 30th, 1998. It was written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, directed by Les Landau. In this episode, Sisko tries to regain contact with the Prophets. In the next episode, which is called Shadows and Symbols, aired on October 7th, written by, a lot of scrolling for this one, Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, directed by Alan Croker. In this episode, Sisko searches for a mysterious orb of the emissary. Worf, Martok, Bashir, O'Brien, and Quark attack a Dominion shipyard in orbit around Monarch 4. Kira confronts the Romulans over their arming of the hospital base, and Deep Space Nine also receives a new resident who has a very familiar name. We're joined by Clay to kick off the seventh season. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. If I sound overly congested, it's not because I caught a late summer cold. It's because I've been crying thinking about Jadzia for the past 2 weeks.
I know your nasal cavities are swollen from all the tissues that you've gone through here. That sounded inappropriate, but we're here to talk. We're here to talk about the seventh season. We made it all the way to the seventh season, Clay. We're almost done.
That's also why I've been crying, because it's so close to being done, but also it's so close to being done. You know?
Yeah. There's positives and negatives, I suppose, just like each and every single episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So we can get into it. We are kicking off the seventh season with this two-parter. I believe this is the only two-parter in the season, and the last 10 episodes end in a kind of arc that mirrors the 6-episode opener of season 6, but we will be doing those one by one. But this one we're going to be talking about 2 episodes.
Is it a full season, or is it truncated at all?
No, it's full. It's 26.
Oh, okay.
So there are... if you ignore the arc at the end, and this one, there's actually only 14. It sounds like a crazy thing to say, but there's actually only 14 episodes that don't exist in that arc, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's a fairly limited amount of time that they have to wrap things up.
Yeah, I didn't know if they were doing that thing that they seem to do all the time now, where it's like, we're coming back for a final season, but it's going to be like 5 episodes.
Yeah, to split a season or something. The actors were. I don't know why Star Trek always goes 7 seasons when all the actors are contracted for 6 to open it up.
That's really silly.
And I don't know why they go to 7 at that point. You think they would just aim to end it at 6 or make it a 7-year contract if they wanted to go 7 years. So I don't know. But anyway, me and Clay both have colds. But let's come back after this break. I'll play an audio clip and we'll break down Image in the Sands and Shadows and Symbols, or Symbols and Shadows. It's one of those two.
I still don't understand why the prophets would send you a vision of Sarah.
I came back here to clear my head, to try to figure out what to do next. Maybe learning the truth about my mother is the first step of this journey.
Well, from here on out, I hope the prophets keep their noses out of my business.
Are there any other secrets I should know about?
Just my gumbo recipe. But I'm taking that to my grave.
A little bit of a low-key opener here, Clay, I guess would be my major takeaway from this one, compared to some of the other season openers that we've had for things where there's like huge ship battles, or you meet the changelings for the first time and have an epic adventure on the Gamma Quadrant or something like that, or the opening 6-episode arc that opened up season 6. This one's relatively small. We get to the end of the 2 episodes back to the status quo, sort of, where things are sort of back where we would expect DS9 to take place, where Sisko's back on the station. Kira's back in second in command. Everyone is reunited. Ezri Dax is here. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much I'll actually have to say about this episode, because I kind of find these 2 a little bit underwhelming. And I think that the things that the show does okay, it manages to do well, but it also continues to traipse us down the path of the prophets, which leads to some ups and downs. But what did you think?
Yeah, I was. It seemed like a real reset button, or like a reestablishing couple episodes, and yeah, I didn't find them super engaging. And I found the Prophet stuff. You know, I don't love that stuff. Obviously, as I've said many times. And all of the interesting things that I thought were possible because of what happened at the end of last season, they just very quickly, they go back to, now the wormhole's open. The power wraith got farted out and everything's fine.
Yeah. Apparently there's only one power wraith, which was causing all the problems too, which is funny. It's only the one guy that they got to throw him out of the bar and everything's all set. Yeah,
I know. It's like he got to the party and locked the door behind him and no one could figure out how to get him out of the house.
You were sort of, there was a comment on YouTube or something that brought up Christian iconography, and you were kind of like, what is this person talking about? I think there was a kind of a misunderstanding about what he was referring to and what you were thinking. But I think you're obviously getting a better sense of why that listener said Christian iconography with this one. Like, but we were talking about before you'd seen this one, and it's like, well, you could kind of say that it's a God versus Satan type thing, but that's not really limited to Christianity. Like, that kind of feels like it's all the Abrahamic religions that have that sort of sense of good versus evil. However, Christianity does have a child born of God figure in it.
So does Star Wars.
Yeah, that's true. So it's moving more into that kind of mystical realm. Do we want to just start with the prophet stuff? We'll get the prophet stuff out of the way. It's the major driving force of the episodes, but I think it's also, to me, maybe the least interesting storyline that spans these two episodes. And to start it off with, I'll say that this is a weird two-parter in that I really think that they could have accomplished everything here in a full episode. And all that the two-parter serves to do is, the first episode serves to spend half of its time reminding you via kind of clunky exposition what happened in the sixth season. And then they go off on their path. But it really feels like the first one is kind of a waste of an episode because it doesn't really move things into gear. And all of the action of what they do takes place in the second episode, which I think is better than the first one.
Yeah, I mean, all the action happens in the second one. The first one's a lot of setup. The one thing I did really like in the first one, and I hope she comes back, is I really liked that Romulan commander. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is about her. She seemed like she was a new character that was a bit of a breath of fresh air. Because she had a bit of a different kind of style than everybody else. And I liked the way she was butting heads with Kira and stuff, and how she wasn't playing it as though she was an evil Romulan. It was more diplomatic than that, but it was still had a little bit of edge to it.
I find her arc a little bit not an arc, but I find her development a little bit weird, I suppose. Like I don't know if they can spend enough time with her to make the twist that she's arming this hospital effective. It kind of feels like it's really cliche, and you're expecting it to happen, but I think the performance is strong enough that it kind of elevates it over the material. But it does feel like it's just a pretty stock standard Romulan thing to do, I suppose. And they never really get into why they're doing it, other than for the sake of the Romulans are treacherous and they just do things like this. Yeah. So it feels a little bit empty, and I think that a lot of the storylines kind of fall into that trap for these two, where they feel like they're happening, but I'm not sure why they're really grounded into the universe. It feels like they're more just plot for plot's sake than they actually have anything to say about the current state of affairs.
Yeah, that storyline I think could have been more effective a couple episodes down the line, where if you established the relationship between those characters and stuff a little bit better. But I'm not saying that would have made it 100% better, or it would be a make or break for me. But it's the prophet stuff. I don't like. I really didn't like the. You said that the prophet stuff felt pretty weak. I mean, and uninteresting. Just think of what they had to do to get to the end of that story. They have secret mother, flashback to Benny Russell, crazy a new orb that no one knew existed that he then has to find and then dig up in the set. It was just like a lot of, as one would say, it was a long way to go for a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't find it very satisfying, and it felt kind of like was the reinstating of the prophets in the wormhole, did that cause any of the other storylines to work out, or was it just like those storylines were all coinciding? Because the way that they cut it together with the climaxing storylines made it seem like that Sisko releasing the prophet or whatever into the wormhole somehow influenced what happened in the other storylines. Like they weren't going well, and then that happens, and then they do go well. But I couldn't tell if that was the intent, or if it was just that they all were successful just around the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I particularly feel that in the Kira blockade storyline, where I feel that I don't think the Bajorans reacted appropriately to their celestial temple reopening when they see that, and I thought that I thought that what the drive of that storyline was going to be that they were sort of being pushed to the breaking point with whether or not they want this blockade to continue. And when the temple reopens, it's like their faith is reaffirmed in what they're doing, and they stand up to the Romulans there, because I actually like the Bajoran plotline quite a bit. We won't touch on it there, but the wormhole opening does just seem to be coincidental with everything else, and no one seems to really react to it the right way. I don't think for how important it is, but I particularly felt it in the Kira thing. Worf not so much, because he's off doing his own thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't think that stuff was that interesting. I thought the Benny Russell thing felt really out of left field, even though I guess it kind of does confirm that it was a prophet vision. In this case, a Pah-wraith vision. Yeah.
Do you think that the prophets or Pah-wraiths gave him the original vision? Or like, did the Pah-wraiths give him the original vision? Is that the implication? Or was it just because they're both the same kind of alien that either one of them can do it?
Yeah, I assumed it was either one.
All right.
And I still don't think that fixes my problems with that episode, because I don't think you should need to watch an episode that happens a half a season later to understand what happens, in that episode. But, yeah, I didn't think they're just throwing a lot at you. The secret mother thing was weird, seeing as we've never even heard him talk about his mother. Yeah, it was just it seemed like they were kind of grasping at straws on ways to make that storyline interesting. Like the storyline is we have to have Sisko find this box and release this thing. Okay, well, what do we do to get him there that isn't just boring?
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're 100% effective. I actually, that being said, I did kind of like the Benny Russell stuff.
I like the Benny Russell stuff, even if I don't know if it fits. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that it does, but I did like the cutting back and forth. That's very similar to the that Buffy episode that I was talking about, where she's in the mental institute. Yeah. Where in this case, it's Sisko or Benny Russell who has to actively make the decision whether or not which reality to choose, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though that's not really the point of what's happening here, but that is what he's doing. Yeah, I thought that stuff was fun, but yeah, I don't know if it really fits with everything else.
I think the prophet thing, to me, the biggest problem is that it reminds me quite strongly of the problems that we had with Star Trek Nemesis, the film, the TNG film, where it feels like there should be a lot of thematic meat to what's going on, and instead it's like the most thematic material without any sense of why this theme would be impacting people the way that it is. And I think that's really the big problem with it, which it goes all the way back to how bland the Bajoran religion is in general, that there's nothing you don't really know enough about it to draw any kind of conclusions about how it's impacting the plot. And I think that's the problem here with this DS9 turn towards this material, is that the prophet stuff should tie into the war better than it does, or it should at least tie into the characters in a way that feels more effective, because there's no prophecies about it, really. They occasionally throw out something that a prophecy will deal with the episode's content, but it's not really. It's stuck in this weird thing where it's a Star Trek show, so they have to kind of keep the prophets like they're aliens, because they are aliens. They're not really gods, according to that, how Starfleet views them. However, Sisko sees them as gods, so they have this mystical quality to them. But because they're stuck in this sci-fi Star Trek universe, the mysticism can't go so far. There's only so much that they can do with it, because then it would stop feeling like a Star Trek episode. Right. And I don't know. I find it really, my problem with the whole prophet storyline here is what you're saying is that there's like a lot of events that go on with it, but it doesn't feel like any of this is really amounting to anything, because by the end of it, it's kind of like a twist for twist's sake. You're like, okay, he's Sisko Jesus Christ, back, reborn to fix things.
Hated that.
But at that, like, it doesn't illuminate anything to me about this show, this plot line. It just feels like it's a mystical plot line laid on top of everything else, and they're going to go through the beats of what this kind of storyline would be, and at the end of it, we'll get to the end of it. But I would just prefer more of a, more Starfleet contention with what the prophets are doing, more like bickering back and forth. The one thing that I do like about this, and that I think is what I'm trying to get at, the cult of the Power Wraiths makes sense to me. That there would be a sort of Satan-worshipping group of Bajorans that want the Power Wraiths to succeed. And I think that you could get a lot of tension out of that, but they don't do much with it except for introduce them and then have one of them try to kill Sisko.
Yeah, I completely forgot that happened until you said that. That was one of the more interesting things that happened. But there's so much that happens in that plot line that I just completely forgot. It's like they give you 4 or 5 different strands of directions they could go, and they just kind of do all of them. They do the first step of like all of them.
Yeah.
The prophets taking control of Sisko's mom's body in order to make sure that Sisko gets born. I don't know. That's garbage. Come on. That's Star Wars Episode 1 level garbage right there.
Yes. It's very, I mean,
like, why do you need to make... So we've spent 6 seasons or into 7 seasons now with Sisko grappling with the fact that he is perceived as this emissary character. Doesn't literalizing that connection take kind of the interesting aspect away from that?
It takes away the Star Trek-y version of it.
Yeah, and I just find like it makes it less interesting, because it's like, well, then... Why? So everything that happened was 100% preordained, and there's no wiggle room for, any other possibility. Yeah.
Well, I'd say why didn't the prophets tell him this? He doesn't learn anything through this journey. Like, if they had told him what his role was at the very start, it doesn't really change anything for his story at that point. So the mysteriousness of the prophets is something that continues to kind of come back and bite you in the ass a little bit, because...
And they also, we had the discussion in, I forget what the hell episode it was. It was one of the big ones as to whether or not the prophets are Deus Ex Machinas. I think retconning into the fact that they actively manufactured Sisko's birth is a pretty Deus Ex Machina thing to do. Mm-hmm. Like it's not in the literal, not in the explicitly narrative sense of, where it ends up in the story or whatever, but it's like, you have this godlike being that's specifically setting in motion all of this stuff. It just feels really lazy to me. Yeah. I don't know really. To me, it feels just empty, I guess, would be like, it's a storyline that I'm just not particularly interested in the beats of where it goes from here. And I think it just comes back to the fact that I don't really understand what the theme is, but where do you go from here? Does he just become like, oh, I guess I have to go to church more, and I guess I have to, I mean, the most interesting thing you could get out of it is that he starts shirking or siding more with the prophets and the Bajorans than he does with Starfleet. Yeah. But I mean, do you really need him to be fucking Jesus Christ to do that? No, I don't think they had already started him on that path, which makes it more of a. There's more character agency in him choosing to go that direction than the prophets coming along and saying, no, this is all preordained. And because the prophets have no sense of time, they know how everything is going to work out for them. So they set these things into motion. Yeah. This is exactly the opposite of what I always say. Like these are excuse me, God. These are elements and story beats that happen not because of the consequence of anybody's actions or decisions. They're just completely manufactured. And there's no drama in that, Yeah. It's too bad. And there's not really much else that I have to say with it. I mean, on the terms of this episode's content, it's just,
I didn't like the Sisko beats, really. I don't know, his leave of absence or whatever. It's been a couple months. He's been off peeling potatoes or whatever he's doing, and sort of trying to figure out what he means. And it's all kind of this clunky writing thing of he sees the baseball fall, and then Esri throws the baseball, and he's like, I got to dig here with my tiny shovel for 5 hours, and we'll dig something up. Yeah.
It reminded me of excuse me, God, fucking colds. I mean, emotions. This past weekend I watched Signs, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, for the first time in a long time, and it's actually not entirely dissimilar to this because I had seen it before. My girlfriend had not seen it before, and I remembered liking it a lot more, except until they get to the end and it gets kind of stupid, as his movies tend to do, unfortunately now. But we were talking about it afterwards, and I was like, yeah, it really kind of takes all of the character work out to an extent if you really extrapolate out exactly what's going on, where it's like, in order to save, I'm assuming people are familiar with the movie Signs, in order to save Mel Gibson's son, God manufactures, or someone manufactures, the death of his wife so he can relay a cryptic message that he can then relay to Joaquin Phoenix, who is only in the right position because he was not a successful baseball player, and their daughter has a weird water thing that is seemingly unconnected until the point where it comes into play. It's like it's less God and more the finger of the writer.
Yeah.
And that when you really start to extrapolate it out, you're like, yeah, I see what they're going for, but I feel like the weight that they want isn't exactly there because it feels so contrived. Right.
Yeah. It feels less a product of circumstance and things coming together, more than just like the writer at the end of the day saying, I've cleverly linked all these things together, and we'll see how they how well everything resolves here is how clever I am, I suppose. Yeah.
I don't think this is quite as gleefully pretentious as Signs kind of is, if you really break it apart.
Yep.
Because they're doing pretty standard stuff where, he gets a cryptic dream and then the ball thing and whatever. That's fine. But, like, does it have to be a secret mom? Why can't it just be his regular mom?
Yeah.
Like, what? Why does there have to be like that? She's never come up before, his mother, so why can't it just be his regular mother?
No, she's never been brought up before, to the point where I was confused about because they don't bring up the fact that he has a stepmother for quite a while into the episode. So you're left with the sense of like, well, did Sisko never ask about his mother or anything like that? Like, why is he totally surprised by this? But apparently his stepmother was posing as his real mother, just because that makes the story make sense. Because they had to have to do that.
Gives it more. It gives it more manufactured drama or manufactured suspense.
Because Sisko would realize something was up otherwise. He needs to be in the dark about why his mother is not the person that he thought it was.
Yeah. It just feels so. It's such a contrived, unnatural way to move the story along. And also, I didn't really get a good look at the picture, but I don't know if they de-aged Brock Peters or something, but from my memory, they didn't, and it was just him with like a really young woman. So I was like, oh, I guess this is probably his sister. And when he was like, no, it's my wife, your mother, I was like, she's like this in that picture. She's like 25 years younger than you.
Oh yeah, the de-aging technology on Brock. They put a little bit of extra makeup on him when he was doing that photo. I always like those things in episodes where they take a picture. It's also funny that it's literally a Kodak picture in the 24th century, that they have a printout of a picture.
It's funny because after a long time of me speculating that pictures don't exist in the Star Trek universe,
they've got them everywhere.
I feel
now.
like, Deep Space Nine has really torn that apart, and I don't think it's for the better. I feel like every time they use a picture, it's generally a poor narrative device.
Yeah, because they used it in that O'Brien episode where he goes undercover because they show the guy's family to eating the steaks. To show that he proved that he has a family. Yeah, I feel, I don't know about you, I feel like I have trouble talking about the Prophet storyline, mostly because I think it's empty. And once you get over your point of like, I don't really know if this is good, I don't really like this. Like, I guess my takeaway would be, I was watching some TNG episodes last night, and when you go back to TNG after watching a lot of DS9, there's like a incredibly stark difference between the shows and how they tell their stories. So. And I think that I don't know if the mysticism angle works on a Star Trek show here, or at least they're not pushing it hard enough for it to feel like it should matter to that way. And if they'd stuck something like this on TNG, I think it would have felt totally out of place. And I think that they've done an okay job establishing that this world exists in DS9, but it's not really. It's not drawing Star Trek-y conclusions off of the Prophet stuff. You know what I mean? It's like they've abandoned taking a Star Trek-y look at what this storyline could be and what it could mean to be like it's kind of about like questioning faith and things like that, and the Bajorans' faith in the face of other species knowing that these are aliens and explaining it away. But it's like, what does that mean for the Bajorans? What does that mean for Sisko? Like, why would someone be drawn to this kind of thing if they lived in this world of like pure science, which is what Star Trek is supposed to be? And they don't really touch on any of that. Sisko just gradually moves towards acceptance because he likes the prophecies on some level, and he thinks that that's really great. But they've already all run into aliens that tell the future and are time travelers. So it's like, why is he drawn to these guys over anything else? And so it feels a little bit hokey and tacked on and just thematically empty. Like if this was about like finding some kind of deeper meaning in life than what Starfleet can provide, I'd be down for that. It feels like a very DS9 approach to what they would want this faith argument to be. But I don't see what Sisko gets out of these guys, and not from his normal life as a Starfleet officer.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I think in TNG the big difference is too that or I should say the difference between TNG handling something like this and Deep Space Nine is I think it works. The fact that it works at all in Deep Space Nine is a credit to the fact that the actors make it seem like the characters believe it. Mm-hmm. Like that, I don't think that, as hammy as he can get, I don't think that it doesn't feel like Avery Brooks is rolling his eyes every time he has to do some shit with the Prophets. Yeah. Whereas, as you were talking about that, I was just imagining, like, Jonathan Frakes doing the stuff that Brooks has to do, and I was like, I wouldn't buy that for a second.
But I think that I don't even know if that's an actor quality thing. I think it might be the tone of the show. Like, can you imagine the TNG characters talking in any sense about the Prophet stuff with a straight face? Like, and I agree with you that seems to be like an actor thing, but it might just be that we're so familiar with them talking like Data that it's very difficult for them to imagine a plot line where Picard is like, you know what, I'm Jesus Christ, basically, and we're going to have to go on this adventure and solve this. All the other characters would lose their minds about it.
Yeah, I think it's also, I think you're right. It's where the other shows and movies take the concept of, hey, what if God was actually just an alien, and extrapolate that out through the sci-fi lens. This one goes, what if God was actually an alien, but also just kind of God?
I would just say the DS9 is saying, what if aliens are gods? But, it's not what if God was an alien, it's what if these aliens are gods. And it doesn't seem to have an interesting conclusion about that statement.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, they kind of stopped there.
Right.
And don't really extrapolate out or really explore it. It's just like, what if it's like the note card, the old note card that's been hanging around since the first season says aliens as gods ? And then they just keep putting that up and they don't really add anything to it.
And it works for Star Wars because Star Wars is fantasy to me. Like, I don't need that kind of level of examination, and I'm okay with it in Star Wars.
It's actually a really interesting comparison because what they do in Star Wars is they actually take the fantasy thing and add bullshit science to it.
Right. Yeah.
And that it doesn't work there because because Star Wars is fantasy. That you take this idea of the Force that was up until that point a very Zen-like sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Just abstract concept.
Yeah. Just mysterious powers.
Yeah, mysterious power, and then we need a specific way to measure it so we can show people that this kid is the strongest one we have. Mm-hmm. And so they come up with this ridiculous like rating system, and link it to basically like a bacterial infection, which is it just doesn't work because it doesn't fit with the rest of the world. And I think it's it's a very good inverse of what they're doing here.
Yeah, that's interesting. And neither series really comes out for the better, in my opinion. Once they started doing that, you have to kind of stick to your lane or stick to the universe that you've built. Because I feel like there's more room for Star Trek to explore this stuff than there is for Star Wars to absorb sci-fi elements into itself.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, so anytime you add sci-fi elements to Star Wars, it does not make it better.
Yeah.
Whether that's distance between planets or how does hyperdrive work or whatever, or,
Yeah. Droid science.
What's the one from the last movie where everybody was getting pissy because they had bombers that just dropped bombs vertically down in space? It's like, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying, but also science has never been the thing people care about or should care about in a Star Wars movie, so I get over it.
That's a good point. The bombers that just drop bombs. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the rest of the Prophet stuff over the course of the season. I think patrons have told you at this point that the Prophets become a prominent force going forward into the end game.
So the only way I feel like I would find the Prophet story somewhat satisfying is if the series ends with Sisko leaving Starfleet to become like a monk or something. Okay.
That's you see that as his end goal or the best case scenario for him.
Yeah, I feel like especially now that he's the son of God essentially or whatever, I feel like that if they were being true to the intention of what this relationship and storyline seems like it was supposed to be, there will be a point where his obligations to the prophets and to the religion butt heads with his obligations to Starfleet, and he sort of chooses the third option and just sort of goes his own way.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we'll remember this.
I was kind of hoping that maybe he'd show up in Picard as essentially just real world Avery Brooks, because I feel like real life Avery Brooks, like the way he shows up in that Captain's documentary, is probably pretty accurate to what Sisko would be like.
He's wearing a lot of leopard print and dark sunglasses and things like that.
Oh man, not to go on a total tangent, but this just reminded me. Did you see the red carpet interview with Terrence Howard from the Emmys?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you need to look it up. It is A+ insanity.
Did this recently happen? Because I saw on Twitter someone tweeted about like Terrence Howard's Wikipedia, and they posted a clip. And his Wikipedia, like I didn't realize how insane Terrence Howard is. I guess.
Yeah. No, this happened like 3 days ago.
Okay, then maybe that's why it was brought up.
Yeah, it's Terrence Howard dressed for an award show on the red carpet, very calmly but purposefully talking to like the reporter who's asking him what his plans are for the evening, about how he has discovered the meaning of true mathematics and can recreate the gravity of Saturn without using numbers and shit. Mm-hmm. And it's complete insanity. And he followed it up with like a 4-page breakdown of the new understanding of math, and it's epically insane.
Yeah, his I guess his thing is that he does not understand why he thinks that he has discovered mathematical proof for why 1 times 1 does not equal 1, why it equals 2. And I guess he posted it on Twitter, and everyone roasted him, I guess, with like mathematicians, I guess, were just like had decided that this actor pretending to discuss mathematics has something to say, and they just kind of called him out on it. But yeah, that's his. Yeah. He calls it teriology or something like that.
Sure. You have to watch the interview, though. The interview is amazing.
It's check it out.
Grade A, open up your third eye shit, you know. And God bless the people who are doing the reporting or the people who are talking to him, because they're like, he's going off about this stuff, and he's like, yeah, and that's why, you know, I've understood that I can find the flower of eternity inside myself, and I'll recreate it through the gravitational pull of Saturn. And the guy's like, yeah, gravitational pull. Now, speaking of pulling, how do you feel about pulling up in second place in the Emmys? And, you know, the guy, they managed to navigate it pretty well. And he doesn't feel, neither of them feel like offended or about the change in subject or anything. Cause like the guy will ask him a normal question and he'll be like, well, you know, a lot of people are watching TV, but what are they really watching? They're just watching signals. And what I found is that the signal inside myself can go to the direct TV link of the universe, that kind of stuff. And it's really worth watching.
There's two other aspects to this, unless you had anything else you wanted to talk about. There's the Bajorans and Kira confronting the Romulans, and then there is the Worf and Bashir, O'Brien, Martok, and Quark adventure. I guess let's just get the Worf one out of the way first.
Sure.
Because I don't really I think that this one suffers from the same thing as the Sisko stuff, except for the fact that I like the character work in it a little bit better than the Sisko work. But I just feel like it's a plot that feels like it should be about something, but it never really digs into it. I think it does it somewhat substantially it has that really great scene where Worf has to apologize to them for being a dick to them, which I think is great, mostly because of Quark's responses to him as he's apologizing, which is really funny.
I liked that scene, but that whole storyline, I'm thinking, what the fuck is Quark doing here? Like, it just that plus, I still hate the Odo and Kira stuff. And all that stuff feels like tacked on character stuff that wasn't really. I mean, the Odo and Kira stuff, obviously they were building to for a while, but like, I still don't buy the Quark was secretly in love with Jadzia thing, and all of a sudden he's voicing about how much he loved her. I don't know. It just doesn't ring true to me.
Yeah. I can see that. I didn't mind him tagging along. It feels like everyone is just kind of tagging along just because they need to have characters in that show.
In the cast do something.
But
what I did like though, or I should say, I liked that storyline. I agree with what you were saying. I wish that they had a little bit more room to get into why the other people were there, as opposed to just they decided to go to the funeral, kind of, because Worf's intention is very clear. And, they get across some of that stuff in that apology sequence too. But I wish that the other ones who were there because they loved Dax had something of a similar honest breakdown of what they were doing there or why they felt the need to come,
Yeah. I think it's
long. You only get 40 minutes. So.
Yeah. And that's kind of the problem. Like, no, the episode is it's a two-parter, right? But it just feels like I'm even struggling now really anything to say about it. I just don't know what there is going on with it. It's kind of if you wanted to take these characters on this route post Jadzia, it's interesting that they wrap it up so quickly. Yes. And that the characters don't really go down a path of any kind of like reconciliation or understanding about what they're thinking about. And at this point, they do. That is the point of this episode. But you would think that idea would have enough legs on it to do like another opening 6-episode arc where the characters are all in different places and then they reconcile at the end of it.
Or at the very least, give it its own episode. If not 6, give it one where that's just what the episode's about.
Oh, yeah, because I'm thinking you could do one episode for each character, almost.
Sure, yeah, if you wanted to, yeah.
And yeah, like the thing about it is just that it happens so quickly that it feels like it's just like they made a bad decision about splitting them up at the end, and now they're just going to reconcile it. And I feel like Dax still doesn't get the sort of send off that she deserves or anything like that. Right. Like it's all built around it, but it feels like it's very surface level and not about anything.
Yeah,
but
like I feel like if you had it have its own episode, I feel like that was all about these characters and their relationship to Dax and their relationship to each other as far as Dax was concerned. I think that scene at the end where their thing works and it blows up that station would have felt a little bit more emotionally weighty. Because I don't really feel like it does what it's supposed to do. And yeah, something like this where it's, 3 people, or 4 if you count O'Brien, I'm not sure what he's doing there. 3 people who love Dax to different degrees are going on a mission to essentially make sure that she gets to heaven. I feel like if once they quote unquote accomplish that, it should be a much more emotional moment especially since, as you were saying, we didn't really get a chance to deal with her death so much at the end of at the end of the last season, or even the first episode of this season.
But it's also undercut by the fact that Dax is resurrected in this two-parter.
Sure.
So Dax is not even really dead. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of, I mean, I guess you could say that the tie-in between the temple, the celestial temple, the wormhole reopening, and Worf's storyline is that you could, if they wanted to interlink those, Worf maybe would have a scene where he sees the wormhole and says maybe that's Sto-vo-kor or something. Like there's some connection between the Bajoran religion and what Worf was trying to do to get her something, where he sees the temple opening and he wonders if that's Jadzia's gateway to get where she needs to go. And maybe that is kind of what they're saying, but it undercuts it with the fact that Dax comes in and is Dax again, as that character has to be, because that's the whole way that character is written. She's supposed to be like, I know all these people, I know all of you, I've lived this a lifetime before. And so it undercuts the Worf suffering bit, which you kind of tell that they recognize, because when Ezri shows up at the end, Worf walks off disgusted because he's like, it's not really Dax, basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's room to wiggle there, but it's shaky ground. I don't feel like there's enough there to really pin any hopes and dreams on the characters in an effective way that makes me feel like it matters or amounts to anything.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like the end of Back to the Future 2, where you see Doc send Marty back to the future, and then immediately Marty comes running up behind him from the events of the second movie.
Yeah.
And it was weird, like the introduction of the new Dax onto Deep Space Nine felt oddly unimportant.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah,
they treat it
because she
so
just kind of shuffles
goofily.
in, and she's like, "Oh, hey Odo, oh hey Kira, nice hair. You know, your suit looks oddly
says,
uncomfortable."
Worf, we'll need to talk.
Yeah, she just walks like, Worf, we're going to need to have a conversation. And it was like, especially with Worf and Bashir and O'Brien coming back from this, quest to send her soul to the afterlife, and it's like, hey guys, there should be a little bit more weight and recognition to that,
Yeah, I would agree. They'll continue the Ezri thing. I think that, and I totally agree with you, but I think it's more of a placement of how that plot would be possible with them, because it's very difficult to introduce her at the end of the episode and not have it come off as being very laissez-faire an approach. Sure. And I agree that I don't think it's right. I would have not had them see her. I don't think to me, it felt like a very dated trope of the 90s show where she shows up at the end there. But I think that if you hide her from them, you don't have to deal with that ramification. And then episodes after this, you can have her introduce herself in a more realistic way to those characters.
And it also feels like after she gets introduced and walks through, they do that like cast shot.
They'll turn their
feels
heads.
Like them going like, here we go again. It didn't totally fit. Like, I feel like it would have been nice to.
Dax even has a line, right? What does she say at that? She says things are going to be different, but still the same, or something. She has some line about that. Yeah.
From now on, why don't you guys just call me Landfill? Like, it would have been nice if maybe they came back from the mission and Worf kind of went off on his own to pray or something, and then it ends with Dax standing in the doorway behind Worf as he's praying, or like that at least implies some weight to their meeting for the first time.
Yeah do the cliche thing of you see their shadows and it's Terry Farrell's shadow instead of the short Ezri Dax shadow.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, so that moves us generally into the Kira storyline with the blockade, which I think is the best storyline. And
I agree.
It ties into what I think the weakness of the other two are, in that this storyline to me feels like a true character progression from where Kira was at the start of the series and where Bajor was to where it now makes sense that they would be. Because to me, this is all about, I love Kira in command. I wish Kira had stayed in command the entire season. If Sisko is off on this vision quest, I think that she's a very nice way to mix up who's in command. But to me, this is the whole series has been about Starfleet was called in to take control of this station to administer it for the Bajorans who are trying to rebuild after this occupation, right? 7 seasons later, the Bajorans are finally starting to stand on their own feet and do things for themselves. And to me, that's what this entire storyline is about. And I think it's really appropriate. It's like really the Bajorans telling Starfleet to like, go fuck yourself. Like, we're going to do this now and we're going to run our own thing. And it works at the end. And so I just feel that it has thematic heft to the storyline, because the storyline is just this blockade thing. But because of how it relates to everything that Kira and the Bajorans have gone through, it means something. And the other plot lines don't have that. And I think that's why they suffer.
And isn't Deep Space Nine, is it originally Cardassian?
Yes, it's a mining station they built.
Okay, so it's not a construct of Bajor; it's a construct of Cardassia.
Yes.
Well, either way,
they're living in a prison camp. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, either way, I think putting Kira in command of Deep Space Nine actually would be a pretty bold thematic statement where, you know, the people who were once oppressed are now the people who are in power here. Yeah, they
literally took the station back from the oppressor and are now running it. Yeah,
which I think could be really interesting. And you know, not to pull out another Cheers reference, but at the end of season 5 of Cheers, when Diane leaves, it ends with Sam selling the bar and leaving. And so when he comes back, this new company has taken over it and installed Kirstie Alley as the manager of the bar, and he just comes back as a bartender. And I was thinking that would be that could have been a really interesting way to go with this, where it's like, yeah, Sisko leaves, Kira gets put into power. The idea here was eventually for Starfleet to leave at some point, right? So. Yep. Why is this not the transition of power over to the Bajorans, who are clearly in a different place than they were 7 years ago?
And I like that transition being stressful for both sides, that it's not something that they don't want this right now to happen, because Starfleet obviously has tactical considerations to think about, and the Bajorans would rather just do it on their own.
Yeah, and it changes your character dynamic a bit, where you've got the same characters, but they're now in different positions, where you've got Kira as the one who's in command, and Sisko is there in a support capacity, but ultimately answers to her now. You know.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what I
do have to say. I like her new hairdo, but man, I don't know if she just drew the short straw as far as which female character had to get an even tighter uniform this season, but it looks actively uncomfortable.
It looks uncomfortable. Yeah, I like her. Her haircut looks the most modern of all of her haircuts, especially when we go back to season 1, you'll see her hair and be like, wow, what the hell is going on there? But her hair looks good. They have tightened up the Bajoran uniforms to an unfortunate degree. And,
it's like they were like, well, we can't just bring in this new younger Dax and put her in like a tighter outfit than the last one. So sorry, Kira, you're the one who needs to be in the tight outfit.
Right. If we're gonna
one of these women has to be in a tight outfit.
We're gonna up the youthful sex appeal. I can't just make the obvious choice and have Esri come in and do it.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. I like the Romulan character. I like that plot line. I think that works and everything. But do you have anything else you want to say before we go to final thoughts about this? I can't tell if we're a little bit rusty on the podcasting, or if there's just not much to talk about with this episode. But I felt like struggling to have anything to say constructive except for the Kira storyline.
You know, it's 2 episodes of Star Trek, and I have like 5 notes. You know, I didn't really, and my first 2 notes are about Kira's hair. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's, you know, I don't know. It's kind of underwhelming. I think it's. Yeah, part of me was wondering if there's a little bit of rush put on about what. Do they know this is the last season?
They do.
Do they know?
They do. Yep.
So that I was wondering if maybe that was involved, where it's like, well, we gotta make sure we get this shit in that we want to do.
I'll bring that up now at this point.
Sure.
I will say, without spoiling anything for you, DS9 is fairly unique for a Star Trek series in that it has an end to it. Ron Moore had a quote like I was reading, he was saying that they had been thinking on DS9 for the past couple seasons about how they want to end the series, basically. So they've been thinking about this, and he compared it to TNG, and he said that he was actually embarrassed to admit that they didn't start thinking about the finale until they were almost close to the end of the season at that point. And then they're like, oh geez, we gotta have to like write something. But I will say that the serialized nature of DS9 leads to there is a sense of finality, like the story ends kind of on DS9, and they have, when you think about all the storyline strands that they have going, they have relatively little time to get through this stuff. I know that they have 26-hour-long episodes to do it, but there is a lot that they have to finish, and they do move in that direction. So it's not like the I guess I wouldn't say that it's the aimless quality of season 6, where we were kind of like, why are there so many filler episodes in this season? I feel season 7 rectifies that a little bit because they know that the end is there and they write appropriately to get to the end point.
Does it end with Sisko and Gul Dukat in like a Scanners type mind battle? Where they're just going, ah!
They actually, they come to a mutual understanding and shake hands and then walk off, and that's the end of the series. Let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip.
Sorry about the stuff that I did back there. Hopefully we can move past this.
Let's conquer another planet.
I forgive you for killing my daughter, but not really, because that was my fault.
Let's take a break. I'll play an audio clip, and me and Clay will come back and read some patron thoughts, and then give our final thoughts and wrap this one up.
The Sisko has completed his task.
Sarah.
The Costamosian no longer threatens us.
You mean the Power Wraith? It's no longer in the wormhole.
I have cast it out.
Is that why the prophets sent me to Tyree? To release you from the orb?
The Costamosian tried to stop you with a false vision, but you did not waver. You fulfilled your destiny.
My destiny? You talk as if my life was over.
The Sisko must still face many tasks.
I don't suppose you'll tell me what they are.
All right, everybody. So if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you can leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes and we read them on the show. Patreon.com is also the place where you can go to support the show. A couple dollars a month. It gets you extra stuff. And right now I'll read the Captain Tier supporters. They get that shout out. Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Captain Quark, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Pouch, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, Yarpy, Joint Mango, Kevin Reyes, Kyle Barrett, Matt Cutler, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elledge, Samuel Custer, Grim Santos, Sean Spinobi, Tark Latif, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much for supporting the show, guys. Let's go to thoughts. There's only 5 of them, Clay, so it's actually pretty short here. Zim Nuclear Wessel says, Image in the Sand continues the unwelcome slide into magic with the Bajoran stuff, but seeing Betty Russell again is still kind of a fun twist. Point Extra G says, this may be where they take it too far with the prophets. The entire plot thread about Sisko's mother is really just, I don't even know. This is one of the things that has never sat right with me all the way back to when it originally aired. And not to be spoilery, nothing really ever comes out of it. It doesn't ever play into anything again, so why do it? It's a shame that part bothers me so because I really enjoy the other aspects of the story, particularly Ezri and Benjamin. I would actually disagree that it doesn't have anything. I think it's, I'm not going to say, I would disagree with that, Clay. So we'll see what you think. Dwayne Hackett says, Image in the Sand, Shadows and Symbols. These episodes should be a contender for the strongest season opener in Star Trek. It has existential threats, intrigue, Romulan duplicity, tragedy, and the mounting Federation losses and the reveal that Sisko's life has been based on a lie, culminating in an epic showdown in a game of chicken, an epic tribute to Jadzia, and a new status quo for the Sisko-Prophet relationship. In fact, I don't think he speaks with any other Prophet after this, which makes far more sense and is very much welcome at this point. These episodes also lend more ammunition to my theory that Benny Russell is actually a real person. Yes, I know Mother Prophet says it was a false vision, but that doesn't make it any less true. Benny can still be very well a part of Sisko's past and future. See my comment on Far Beyond the Stars regarding Sisko's life transcending both Benny and Ben. Image is a great setup episode for what is to come for Season 7, and Shadows is by far one of the best closing to any Star Trek two-parters. Yes, even better than Boast of Both Worlds as two-parters go. These episodes should be considered a guilty pleasure for all Trek fans. 5 out of 5.
What?
He gave it a 5.
It's a guilty pleasure, but it's the strongest opener in all of Star Trek. I don't know if those things really line up.
He likes it.
So Sisko doesn't talk to the prophets ever again in the rest of the season?
He talks to the Mother Prophet.
Oh, so
he's saying that he doesn't talk to any of he doesn't have those scenes where he's like shifting between people and a lot of prophets are talking at him.
All right, I get you. Gotcha.
Russell Elledge says, a new season, a new hairstyle for Kira. Overall, I enjoyed these episodes, appreciated that they gave me time to see how the characters are dealing with the death of Jadzia. I liked the Sisko storyline. It gave more depth to his relationship with the prophets, and having Brock Peters on to play Joseph Sisko is always a treat. The Worf O'Brien Bashir storyline was okay, although I didn't like Quark in the episode. He was petulant and whiny, and I felt he was a distraction. I didn't care for the Kira Romulan storyline. It seemed out of place. In a time of war, it would seem Bajor would want as many weapons as possible to defend itself, and I just don't buy that Kira would go to these lengths. It seemed like the writers had to fill time and thought that taking Kira back to her underdog freedom fighter roots would be a pretty good way to go. And although I don't really like Kira's new hairstyle, the Na'vi visitor always looks lovely. And then the last comment. Kyle Barrett says, a stronger start to the season than I remembered. I like that the premiere puts introspective character work above action, and somehow the episode manages to make the Sisko as a prophet reveal work for me. I like Worf and co. wallowing in grief about Jadzia's death, although their mission isn't great, and the Bajoran missile crisis sure escalated quickly. But I love Colonel Kira. I wish that she would stay in charge of the station for the entire season, and Sisko, as a repercussion for leaving, would have to take the role of second in command. I feel it would improve both characters, and Sisko having more time to deal with his role as the emissary and still being the highest-ranking Starfleet officer on the station, and Kira, well, just having stuff to do, and it would be a fun change in the status quo if they changed roles for this final stretch. It would be a fun change in the status quo if they changed roles for the final stretch. I'd agree with that. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about this. There's only 5, so if people are unaware, there is a new Patreon list about the comments section. You go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile, and you can leave your comments there. Fill them up. Let me know what you think about upcoming episodes, and we'll read them. Clay, what do you think about this episode? Do you have anything you want to say about the patron comments, first and foremost? I find, maybe the DS9, this change that DS9 is doing, if there is one good thing about it, it's obvious to me that it's showing different people what they like or is possible in a way that the systematic sameness of TNG doesn't allow for this kind of difference in opinion that we're seeing at this point here. Right. And I would say that I don't really like the Prophet stuff. If you like it, I see that you could have a totally different take on how this ending is going for them. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it's, it is what it is. It's not like ruining the show for me or anything, because it's not. It's not dysfunctional is the problem. Like, there's nothing really wrong with it. It's just, to me, it's not particularly interesting. Yeah, and it's not something that's just been added. Well, aside from the Jesus stuff or the whatever. It's not something that has been just added for the final season. It's not like it's been hard sci-fi all the way up to this point, and then all of a sudden they discovered these god aliens, then it's taken a turn towards the mystic. Right. It doesn't really feel that out of place. It's just, it's not my cup of tea, and it hasn't really intruded on the other stories or story elements to the point where I find it distracting or really detrimental. Yeah. So I can see, it's not my thing, but if other people like it, that's fine. Yeah. What are you going to give this one on a scale of 1 to 5 for the 2 episodes considered as 1? So we'll just give a 1 grade. I got to go with 3, I think. Yeah. It's a 3 for me. Nothing, I was just surprised for a season opener. It didn't grab my attention. Really, it's like that's like the worst thing I can say about it. It didn't really hold me, especially for a 2-parter as well. Like if this was just a single episode and they were doing all this stuff in one episode and it didn't kind of grab me, I'm like, all right, that's whatever. But they're doing it across 2 episodes, and by the end, I'm just kind of like, all right, I don't really know where that sets us up for the rest of the season, and I didn't find it super engaging or super exciting. But I guess everyone's back on the station, so I guess it did what it had to do. Right. If it was 1 episode, you could see it as kind of a table setter episode to just get things back to where they need to be. Yeah. But you think that you associate a kind of epicness with the 2-parter that I don't think this one really had, and maybe wasn't even intentionally trying to do. I know they were intentionally trying to make a more low-key season opener for this, and I just... It feels like the events are too big for that kind of a low-key thing, so I'm a little conflicted. There's some pretty operatic things happening for something that's supposed to be low-key, Right, yeah. It's every day the Son of God just appears. Trying to get spirits into Valhalla, plus you've got God birth baby and resurrection of a character and stuff like that. Yeah, resurrection of a character and a epic game of intergalactic chicken. They're pretty high stakes, or at least seemingly epic feeling operatic elements that it's tough to downplay those things and have it, it's tough to just sort of like casually walk through those ideas, especially when you're doing them all at the same time.
Me and Clay are both going to give this one a 3. So we're off to starting season 7. Let us know, guys, what you think. Leave your thoughts on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Pensky File is a place to go if you want to support the show. Much appreciated. It is actually, there's a new goal for Voyager. If you want to see full Voyager coverage, there's a financial level that we have to reach on Patreon, I suppose. Otherwise, we'll just do a curated list as it is. But if people are interested and find a value in a full Voyager rewatch, I suggest you go to patreon.com/The Pensky File and figure out the details there if you want to support the show.
If we hit that and we start Voyager, but then it drops below that, do we stop?
There'll be a little bit of leeway, but if it's like lemmings jumping over a cliff or something like that, it'll probably, it'll change. So it's not like a one-time just get to this for 1 month, I think, but we need to be around there, I suppose. There's a little bit of leeway.
Full frontal Voyager.
We'll see. But go to patreon.com if you guys are interested in that. And that is the compromise that we will make. So if we reach it, we'll do the full thing. If we don't, we'll do a curated at some point. So otherwise, check out the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Discord, all down below. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off?
I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'm out of things to plug at the moment.
We're ready for season 7. We're in the home stretch. Only 23 more episodes, 24 more episodes, something like that. We've only got 20-something episodes left, and then we're going to wrap up our adventures with Deep Space Nine. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.